Hello everyone. Today we will discuss Nivedita Menon's book Seeing Like a Feminist. In her book, Menon challenges many assumptions that come from Western feminism, especially what she calls governance feminism, the kind of feminism that works comfortably with state power. Let me start with her central idea. Menon asks us to think about how society maintains itself. She gives us an example: nude makeup. What is nude makeup? You spend hours applying products to your face to create the illusion that you are wearing nothing at all. The goal is to look naturally radiant, but achieving that look requires enormous effort, skill, and time. Society works exactly like this. Our social order, the rules about gender, family, work, and power, requires endless daily performances, rituals, laws, and repetitions. But the goal of all this activity is to make everything look natural, timeless, and unchangeable. Patriarchy wants to look like simply the way things are, not the way things have been made. This is where Menon introduces her key method, the reveal formatting function. If you have used Microsoft Word, you know that a document can look clean and seamless on your screen. But when you click reveal formatting, suddenly you see all the hidden quotes, the paragraph breaks, the spacing, the underlying structure that holds the text in place. The feminist gaze does exactly this. It strips away the illusion of naturalness from our institutions. It exposes the strenuous scaffolding required to keep patriarchy functioning. When you learn to see like a feminist, you stop accepting things as just natural and start asking what work is being done to make this look natural. Who benefits? What is being hidden? Menon carefully differentiates her feminist seeing from a famous concept in political theory. James C. Scott wrote a book called Seeing Like a State. He argues that when the modern state looks at society, it simplifies and standardizes everything. The state wants to make complex human practices legible so it can control them. The state's gaze is about domination from above. But the feminist gaze is completely different. It is a deliberate act of subversion from below. When feminists see, we do not want to make the world more orderly for easier management. Instead, we want to destabilize settled hierarchies, expose hidden operations of power, disorganize normalized social relations, and open up multiple liberatory possibilities. Feminism is not an identity you simply claim. It is not a club you join. Feminism is a disruptive political methodology. It is an ongoing historical responsibility. It recognizes that the world is organized hierarchically around gender to protect the status quo. Menon insists that gender cannot be studied alone. The category of woman is split by other axes of power: caste, class, race, and religion. An upper caste Hindu woman in India or a white woman in the United States holds relative dominance when dealing with a working class man. However, she simultaneously experiences structural subordination when facing patriarchal violence within her own group. Therefore, Menon's project is not about tracking individual men and women, it is about mapping the structural processes that produce positions of power and vulnerability. We must understand how systems work together, not separately. Popular culture treats the family as a natural oasis of love, emotional support, and altruism. Menon completely dismantles this myth. She analyzes the family as a highly policed, state backed economic institution. The modern patriarchal family is structurally dependent on inequality. It relies on hierarchies of age and gender, where adult male authority routinely overrules everyone else. To prove this, Menon cites a shocking 1984 ruling by the Delhi High Court. The court openly stated that bringing constitutional fundamental rights inside the family home would be like letting a bull into a china shop. Think about what this means. The court admits that if every individual in the home were treated as a free and equal citizen with full rights to autonomy and bodily integrity, the traditional family would collapse. The state actively shields the home from democratic principles. Why? Because the family is the primary vehicle of transferring private property and family names from fathers to sons. This economic setup creates a permanent structural anxiety around paternity. Here is a simple fact: motherhood is biologically certain. We always know who the mother is, but fatherhood is a sociological construct. We can never be absolutely certain because property cannot pass to an illegitimate heir without disrupting the entire system of capital accumulation. Patriarchy must strictly control female sexuality. The family is not just a collection of relatives, it is a mechanism for keeping caste, race, and religious boundaries intact. It achieves this by forcing desire into legitimate procreative heterosexual paths. Menon highlights two phenomena that reveal this systemic panic. First, the backlash against Valentine's Day. When Valentine's Day became popular in India during the 1990s, the Hindu right launched violent attacks against young couples celebrating in public. Why such panic? Because commercialized romance, for all its flaws, allows for individual choice. It creates space where love might cross caste and religious borders. The family correctly recognizes that unstructured desire is dangerous because it refuses to participate in the organized reproduction of caste identities. Second, what the media calls honor killings. Menon prefers the term custodial deaths used by legal scholar Pratiksha Bagsi. These are extrajudicial executions where young people are murdered by their own families by choosing partners outside approved caste or religious lines. In northern India, traditional village councils called Kap Pandayats frequently issue these deadly edicts. They try to ban marriages within the same clan or the same circle of villages. Dr. Ambedkar, the great anti-caste leader, argues in 1936 that intercaste marriage is the ultimate solvent for the annihilation of caste. Decades later, these councils still fight fiercely against self chosen love because they share Ambedkar's realization. Autonomous desire can completely dismantle the entire architecture of caste. The family is sustained by the sexual division of labor. Menon insists that there is absolutely nothing natural about assigning housework to women. Except for pregnancy, every single domestic task, cooking, cleaning, laundry, caregiving, can be performed equally well by men. However, society frames these tasks as women's work through intense cultural training. To analyze this, Menon draws on Marx's theory of labor power. Under capitalism, an employer pays a worker a wage for their daily labor. But what keeps that worker capable of showing up day after day? It is the hidden domestic labor happening in the home. The food, clean clothes, and emotional care that restores the worker's capacity to produce wealth. Capital extracts huge benefits from this arrangement. This vital work of reproducing labor power is performed almost entirely by women within the domestic sphere at zero cost to the market. It is a massive subsidy to capitalism. When women enter formal paid work, this division does not vanish. Instead, it duplicates into two forms of discrimination. First, the double burden. Working women are forced to handle a second shift. They remain the primary caretakers of the home while simultaneously selling their labor in the market. Second, the devaluation of women's professional work. Professions that are heavily feminized, such as primary school teaching and nursing, are paid significantly less than male dominated jobs. Society justifies these low wages by paternalistically claiming these careers are extensions of women's natural, nurturing disposition rather than recognizing them as highly skilled human labor. Next, Menon moves from social institutions to the physical body itself. She uses Simone de Beauvoir's famous statement, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." Menon goes further. She argues that even biological sex is not an unmediated fact. Our understanding of the biological body is always filtered through cultural assumptions. To prove this, she tracks how something as trivial as the gendering of colors has shifted. In the early 20th century, Western retail designated pink for boys and blue for girls. In 1927, Time magazine noted that a Belgian royal cradle was decorated in pink in anticipation of a boy. The Ladies' Home Journal explained that pink, being a stronger color derived from red, was more suited for boys, while blue was delicate and dainty for girls. This complete reversal of modern norms demonstrates that things we take as natural are actually temporary products of historical socialization. Menon extends this critique to scientific discourse. She draws on feminist anthropologist Emily Martin's research on biology textbooks. Martin discovered that even when describing cell level reproduction, scientists rely on stereotypical gender tropes. Textbooks routinely describe the female egg as passive and helpless, being transported or drifting down the fallopian tube, waiting to be rescued by an active, aggressive male sperm. However, modern biochemical research reveals a completely different process. The sperm's mechanical motion is actually too weak to penetrate the egg on its own. The surface of the egg actively exudes chemicals that draw the sperm in. However, when this discovery was made, scientific literature did not shift to a collaborative model. Instead, it reframed the egg as a dangerous predatory femme fatale. Scientific narratives often work to naturalize patriarchal hierarchies rather than simply recording objective facts. Next, Menon explores desire. She examines how queer and transgender politics disrupt conventional feminist frameworks. Queer theory does not just expand the movement to include more identities, it challenges the foundational subject of feminist politics, the category of woman itself. When counter heteronormative movements emerge, they complicate basic questions. Who is the true subject of feminist politics? Can gay men, and trans women claim the space of feminist politics? Menon looks at traditional South Asian transgender communities such as hijras. Some hijras claim a distinct identity that completely bypasses the male female binary. This challenges the idea that political resistance must be organized around a stable biological female identity. However, Menon also highlights a major internal tension within contemporary queer movements: the deep split along class lines. Research shows that elite, English educated, upper and middle class queer activists often assume class is not a primary issue. But working class queer individuals identify economic survival as the single largest barrier they face. This has created a fragmented political landscape. Elite and working class queer individuals come together on broad political platforms to fight specific laws, but they separate back into segregated class silos when it comes to personal socializing and networking. Menon warns that if queer and feminist movements focus only on identity and ignore material realities, they risk becoming lifestyle spaces for the privileged. They leave the core systems of capitalist and caste exclusion completely unchallenged. Menon offers a counterintuitive critique of feminist reliance on criminal justice systems. While feminists must fight for legal protections, Menon warns that the law is blunt, state centered tool that often reinforces patriarchy rather than dismantling it. Consider the debate over making rape laws gender neutral. Feminists want to recognize sexual assaults against men, boys, and trans individuals. However, making the definition of the perpetrator gender neutral is highly controversial. In a deeply sexist society, abusive men could use neutral laws to file false retaliatory complaints against women who speak out. Menon also looks at sexual harassment in universities. She analyzes the landmark 1997 Vishakha judgment, which established workplace guidelines based on consent. Menon shares her first-hand experience managing these courts in Indian universities. Sexual harassment rarely consists only of isolated extreme acts. It is sustained by a normalized culture of sexist jokes, inappropriate comments, and subtle power dynamics. Because professors control grades, recommendations, and future careers, students are incredibly vulnerable. This dynamic makes true uncoerced consent impossible. Menon shares a 2006 case study where a powerful Delhi University professor was found guilty of harassment. Instead of enforcing the recommended punishment, the university administration hid the report. They even rejected a right to information request using a bizarre loophole. They claimed releasing the report would endanger the life or physical safety of the perpetrator. This proves Menon's point. The state and its institutions naturally protect powerful men. Legal mechanisms are only effective if backed by constant, organized external political mobilization. Expanding to macro politics, Menon examines rape as a structural weapon. In conflict zones, sexual violence is not an individual deviation. It is a calculated strategy to break the political will of marginalized communities. Menon highlights the July 2004 protest in Manipur. A group of elderly Meitei women marched entirely naked to the gates of Kangla Fort, confronting the Indian army with a banner reading, Indian Army Rape Us. They were protesting the custody torture, rape, and murder of a local woman by soldiers operating under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, a law granting near total legal immunity to military personnel in occupied territories. By stripping off their clothes, these women staged a radical intervention. In patriarchal culture, a woman's body is seen as the repository of family honor, and its exposure is supposed to bring shame. These women subverted that script. They used their nakedness to reject patriarchal protection and mock the state's moral authority. However, Menon launches a sharp post-colonial critique against how Western institutions interpret such struggles. She challenges what Janet Halley terms governance feminism, a strand of white universalist top-down feminism that has entered international state power and global NGOs. When governance feminism looks at conflict in the global south, it flattens local context. It interprets all geopolitical violence through single lens, a global war against women. This framing erases local political issues like land rights, self-determination, and anti-colonial resistance. It assumes that a woman in Manipur shares identical goals with a white female lawyer in Washington simply because they are both women. It isolates gender from race, caste, and imperialism, allowing Western states to use women's rights as a moral excuse to intervene in the global south. Menon also shows how identity politics can split progressive movements. She uses the debate over the Uniform Civil Code in India to show how gender justice can be co opted to majoritarian nationalism. In India, matters of marriage, divorce, and inheritance are governed by distinct religious laws. Historically, every single one discriminated against women. Feminists initially demanded a uniform civil code to ensure equal rights regardless of religion. But the political landscape shifted after the Shah Bano case of 1985. Shah Bano, an elderly Muslim woman, sued her divorced husband for maintenance. The Supreme Court ruled in her favor. Conservative Islamic leaders protested. The government caved to religious pressure and passed a law stripping Muslim women of their secular right to maintenance. Seeing an opportunity, the Hindu right-wing BJP co-opted the call for a uniform civil code. They did not care about women's liberation. They used the UCC as a nationalist tool to paint Hindus as modern while demonizing Muslims as backward. This forced a rethink. Feminists realized that the top-down legal uniformity would simply impose upper caste Hindu models on minorities. So they shifted strategy, campaigning for secular laws that apply to all citizens regardless of faith and supporting internal reform from within each religious community. Menon also examines the long delayed Women's Reservation Bill in India, which proposed reserving 33% of parliamentary seats for women. At first glance, this looks like an obvious win for gender justice, but it faced fierce resistance from lower caste parties. The critique was simple. In a deeply unequal society, a blanket reservation without a subquota for Dalit and backward class women would simply favor elite upper caste women. During the 1980s, Parliament shifted from an upper caste club to a body reflecting the lower caste majority. A blanket 33% reservation would allow elite families to field their female relatives to reclaim those seats, pushing out lower caste male leaders. Menon uses this debate to remind us that woman is not a neutral category. Upper caste women hold significant social privilege. Their empowerment can reinforce caste hierarchy if not checked by an intersectional framework. Towards the end of the book, Menon raises a question. What happens when a woman freely chooses something that contradicts feminist values? This creates tension between two beliefs that women are rational agents capable of self determined choices, and patriarchal values shape what choices are even possible. When a woman chooses to abort a female fetus due to son preference, or enters a marriage requiring a bankrupting dowry, or enters sex work, she is acting as an agent. We cannot dismiss her choice as false consciousness, but we also cannot celebrate it as pure liberation. Menon grounds this in two debates. First, commercial surrogacy. Some feminists view surrogacy as the ultimate commodification of poor women's bodies. Others argue it can be a rational financial option. Menon warns that well-meaning feminists often speak for these women without their input. Many surrogate mothers actually prefer anonymity due to social stigma. Top-down laws can destroy vital income sources. Second, anti-pornography feminists align with the state to demand censorship. Menon strongly opposes this. Any power you give to the state will be weaponized against the marginalized. When the state enforces obscenity laws, it does not target misogynistic media. It cracks down on queer literature and feminist artwork. Menon insists that desire is too fluid and unpredictable to be regulated by rigid codes. Feminists must treat women's decisions with respect, work to transform material conditions, and remain ready to have our own assumptions destabilized. Menon issues an important warning. Since the 1990s, the word gender has become accepted in government and corporate policy. But this acceptance has come at a cost. In state language, gender has been domesticated into a bland synonym for women. It treats women as fixed objects to be integrated into existing systems through checklists. In radical feminist theory, gender is meant to disrupt binaries and expose power. When the state domesticates it, the focus on power relations vanishes. Feminism becomes a managerial project that actually solidifies patriarchal structures. Postcolonial feminist theory must remain sensitive to geopolitical location. You cannot copy paste analysis from one context to another. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal each have different histories of partition, civil war, and revolutionary movements. To see like a feminist is not to find a comfortable position of moral purity. It is to accept that patriarchy is an ongoing shifting project that must assemble itself daily. Because these structures are fragile, they can be disrupted. Use the reveal formatting function. Never accept any institution, law, or identity as natural or finished. Keep looking for the cracks because within those unstable spaces lives the true potential for human liberation. Thank you.